Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. In the description of this video, you can find my compiled link. Through there, you can find ways to support the channel, my other social media, and more. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. How's it going, everybody? CJ here, back with another video. We're doing a first thoughts today. This first thoughts is on Quintorius, Loremaster. Sweet new Boros commander here. It involves casting things out of your graveyard and cheating the mana cost on those. It involves making tokens, specifically spirits. It's a cool card. It's Strixhaven-y, lore-holdy, very cool. I like it. I think it's going to do some neat stuff, and I think the deck around it's going to be a lot of fun to play. The categories I'll be talking about today are some spirit-related stuff, just a couple cards that work really well with the spirits. Some token stuff, because you're making tokens, you might as well capitalize on that. There's some cards that work really well. This is not going to be a token-heavy deck, but there's some cards that will improve the token generation and synergize really well with the token generation. After that, we're going to talk about ways to fill your graveyard, so that way you can exile cards that you want to cast for free off of Quintorius. And then we have some more specific things with some good artifacts, some good instant and sorceries, some good enchantments, and some good planeswalkers to cast off of Quintorius, and some cards that synergize with those. Those are the four main card types that Quintorius will let you cast from the graveyard, and you might as well lean into one or the other if you really want to get the best synergies, but you can always just kind of mix and match whatever cards you like and do whatever you want to do. I'm just here to talk about some of the cards individually that I think work really well in the deck. And after that, we'll have the one-off cards, so let's just jump on into this. The first few cards I wanted to mention are just decent cards when you're running spirits. When you have like the spirit tokens going, they just work really well in the deck. Those cards include Drogskull Reinforcements, Hoffrey, and Quintorius Field Historian. Hoffrey and Quintorius Field Historian I think are auto includes in this deck. I think they're fantastic, and they work really, really well and synergize really well in this deck. But that's all I really had for spirit stuff. There's not too much spirit stuff that I think matters enough, because you're not making that many spirits. You're making one a turn unless you do some other cards, like some other token generation. Token generation seems pretty good. So, next category we're going to talk about is token generation. We're going to start off with cards that create more spirit tokens, because spirit tokens work pretty well in this deck. Some of those include Promise of the Bunnery, Priest of the Blessed Graph, Release to Memory, Twilight Drover, and Ugin the Ineffable. Ugin is fantastic because when you sacrifice those spirits to Quintorius, it's card draw. It's great. Love it. Adding in these extra token generators means that some of the token synergy cards could work really well in the deck. A lot of these token synergy cards I think work well in the deck anyways, just because you're already making tokens, so why not make tokens and get benefits off of that? But if you're making extra tokens, then these just get stronger and stronger. Some of those cards include Roar of the Resistance, Staff of the Storyteller, and Idol of Oblivion for card draw. Nayali, it could be a win con later in the game. Same thing with Intangible Virtue, plus the Vigilance is really nice. Mondrak and Anointed Procession for doubling up your tokens. And Prava for giving a big buff to your tokens, along with being a token generator as well. Having spirits to sacrifice is half the game. The other half is going to be having stuff in your graveyard, so that way you can exile it and then cast it for free. Well, for free, for 3 mana. So you need ways to fill your yard. There's 2 different routes I could think of to efficiently fill your graveyard with the cards you want, and those include self-mill and discard. So we're going to talk about both of those. We'll start off with self-mill. Some of the ways to mill your own library include Altar of the Brood, Altar of Dementia, Codex Shredder, Convergence of Dominion, which is also really nice if you happen to have cards in your graveyard with abilities that require an activation cost. Lorehold Excavations, which lets you create more tokens. Millikin, which is also ramp, which is nice. And my favorite self-mill card, Mesmeric Orb. Really sweet card there. Self-mill is a way to do it kind of in bulk. But if you want to be more choosy about what goes into your graveyard, running discard could work really well. A lot of these discard outlets involve also drawing cards. So you can kind of filter what you go to hand and what goes to the graveyard, so that way you can get the big stuff in your graveyard to get exiled, and then boom, you can do your thing. Some of the good discard outlets include Argentum Mastercore. I think this card is sweet. It's a cool removal card. It's a good discard outlet. I think it's really fun, and I want to try it out. Cathartic Reunion. There's a few Chandras that work really well. Daretti. Also, Daretti works well in the artifacts discussion that I'll be talking about later. Faithless Looting. Gaia Reach Sanitarium. Discard on the land. Nice. Jaxus. Jaya. Magus of the Wheel. And other wheels. Mishra. There's a couple of good Nahiris. Neheb. Seasoned Pyromancer, which is sweet because it also has an ability from the graveyard. Seismic Assault. Thrilling Discovery. And Thrill of Possibility. You're in red, so you're going to have a lot of good discard choices, so you might as well capitalize on that. And if you do run a lot of discard, you might as well run cards that synergize when you discard cards. Some of those cards include Brawlin, Conspiracy Theorist, Containment Construct, Currency Converter, which is a phenomenal card in this deck because it also lets you discard cards, and Surly Badgersaur, just tons of value there. Moving on to the card types, starting off with artifacts. There's a lot of really good artifacts that you can kind of bring into play using Quintorius, and a lot of good synergies with that. Some of the big splashy artifacts that you can toss into your graveyard and then reanimate include Darksteel Forge, Portal to Phyrexia, which is extremely powerful, Spine of Ishai. Both Portal and Spine are fantastic when you can cycle them in and out of your graveyard. God Pharaoh's Statue and Immortal Sun are pretty good hate cards. Mindslaver seems like a lot of fun, being able to bring back Mindslaver over and over and just keep taking your opponent's turns. If you're going the artifact route, there's a few cards that work really well in an artifact style deck, especially in Boros, and those cards include Oswald and Osgear, Goblin Engineer and Goblin Welder, Scrap Trawler, and Wake the Past. Moving on to instants and sorceries. There are some splashy instants and sorceries that you can toss into this deck if you wanted to, and those include Stormherd, Soulfire Eruption, Insurrection, just straight up win con, Surge to Victory. I think this might be one of the best cards for this deck, especially if you're heavy on big instants and sorceries, because it makes it so you can cast one of them out of your graveyard multiple times based on the number of creatures that you have that are attacking and such. It's a really cool card, and I think this is a perfect home for it. Reverse the Sands is just a hilarious card, and I would love to see people pull it off. And Brass's Bounty for just tons of treasure generation. If you go the instant and sorcery route and you run a lot of them, there's a couple of good synergy cards, including Arcane Bombardment and Mizzix's Mastery. Now we're on to enchantments. There are some great enchantments for this deck. I think in doing a Boros Enchantress style deck with Quintorius and just bringing back huge enchantments from your graveyard seems like a lot of fun, and it could be a pretty powerful strategy. Some of the big splashy enchantments you can run include Overwhelming Splendor, Eldrazi Conscription, Vicious Shadows, which is nice because you're already going to be sacrificing creatures, Martyr's Bond, Sunbird's Invocation, Song of the World Soul. You can also just do a ton of token generation with that, True Conviction, Fiery Emancipation, and Legion Loyalty. Some of the synergy cards for enchantments include Academy Rector, Ajani's Chosen, Archon of Sun's Grace, Sigil of the Empty Throne, and Hallowed Haunting for token generation. Enduring Ideal seems hilarious. Greater Oromancy to protect your enchantments, Mesa Enchantress for card draw, and Opalescence along with Starfield of Nyx. Those can turn your huge enchantments into massive creatures and turn them into big beaters and win the game through damage by attacking with your huge enchantments. That seems super fun. I love that idea. Moving on to the last card type that I wanted to mention specifically, we have Planeswalkers. This is a cool Planeswalker commander. You can kind of just pull Planeswalkers out of your graveyard and ultimate them or minus them and stuff. Don't really have to worry about them dying, because if they do, they go back to the graveyard and you're just able to bring them back with Quintorius again. Seems good. Seems like a really fun strategy, and there's a bunch of good walkers that are in these colors. Those walkers include Ugins, Karns, Ajani's, Chandra's, Comet, a cute dog, Elspeth's, Gideon's, Huatli's, Jaya, Koth's, Sarkhan's, Sarah, the Wanderer, and Zariel. And if you go the Planeswalker route, there's of course some very synergistic cards that you could toss into this deck that would put in a lot of work. Those cards include All Will Be One. This card can just straight up win games. It can do tons of damage in a heavy Planeswalker deck. Arena Rector, Deploy the Gatewatch, Chandra's Regulator if you run a bunch of Chandras, Jeru as a tutor, Lae'zel for extra counters on your planeswalkers, Luxior, Mila for a little protection, Oath of Gideon and Oath of Chandra. Planebound Accomplice, I think this is one of the coolest cards for this deck. It's basically a sneak attack for your planeswalkers. So you can pay 1 red, bring a planeswalker into play, activate it, goes to your graveyard, you bring it back with Quintorius. It's a good way to put planeswalkers in your graveyard for cheap and getting a benefit off of it. And then lastly, the Chain Veil, just activate an additional time, fantastic. Those are all the main card types that you can pull out of your graveyard with Quintorius. I think that going for a single card type and kind of leaning towards that strategy might be one of the stronger ways to play this commander because you're able to use all the synergies. However, if you want to just go and pick out all your favorite cards that I've mentioned or all your favorite big stuff that you can just toss into this deck and mash all together, go for it. That would still be a very fun deck. It wouldn't be as focused, but it would still put in a lot of work and it'd be very fun and interesting. Now we're on to the one-off cards though. So in the one-off cards we have Triumphant Reckoning, Brilliant Restoration, and Profound Journey. I separated these because they work with a bunch of different card types, so I didn't want to put them into different categories. I wanted to just mention them all together. You have Thousand Year Elixir and Mage Right Stone, so that way you can activate Quintorius more than once in a turn. You have Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. Both of those seem important in this deck. Being able to give Quintorius haste is huge, along with protection, because this deck really revolves around Quintorius sticking around, so you need him to live. This is a good way to make it so he stays alive. Cellar Door is a really funny card for this deck, because if you're casting instants and sorceries out of your graveyard with Quintorius, and Quintorius has a little wording on him that says, if it were to go to your graveyard, instead put it on the bottom of your library, Cellar Door lets you take it out from the bottom of your library, put it back into your graveyard. So let's just say you cast something like Stormherd, and it would go to the bottom of your library, you can Cellar Door it back into your graveyard, pull it back out with Quintorius, and cast it again. That's sweet. Illusionist Bracers, Battle Mage's Bracers, and Lithoform Engine seem fantastic, so that way you can copy the ability. Stonebound Mentor seems perfect for this deck. Stuff is going to be leaving your graveyard constantly, so it's just a bunch of extra scries. And lastly, Crucible of Worlds. I think this works very well in this deck because you're going to be milling and discarding cards, so if lands end up in your graveyard, it lets you play your lands from your graveyard. That way you can kind of keep up with everybody else. You're in the colors that are the worst at ramping. This card could help to mitigate the difference there. That is everything I have for Quintorius Loremaster. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Peace out, everybody.